Hi everyone, and welcome to week 2 of Clare's Poetry Circle. I'm Clare Pollard, I'm a poet, and every week this autumn I'm going to be putting up a mini workshop and setting a poetry exercise for the week, which you can share at hashtag Clare's Poetry Circle on Twitter or Instagram or in the comments here. And many thanks to all those who shared their funny, beautiful, depressing, moving pandemic list poems this week. It's been really lovely to have so many people joining in and sharing the circle with others. And do let anyone you know who you think might enjoy joining us, do let them know about the circle and tell them to join in. Now, if you're keen-eyed, you might have noticed on my shelf last week I had a book by the contemporary poet Rachel Long, My Darling from the Lions, which I'd really recommend. My husband has this idea, my husband Richard, that I prop up a different book there each week to show you what I'm reading that week. A little feature to make you look. This week it's one of my all-time favourites, Gwendolyn Brooks, I've been reading. I also wanted to show you this anthology I got in the post last week. It's just come out with Blood Axe. It's called Staying Human, and I'm lucky to have a poem in it. That's why I got it in the post. But if you're completely new to poetry and you're wondering where to start reading, maybe a bit intimidated by all the names you haven't heard of, the best place to start, I'd recommend to any of my students, is to invest in a big fat anthology like this to dip into and find out what you like. It's got all sorts of stuff in it. A lot of my favourite contemporary poets in it, and it's a really diverse mixture. It's got poems from around the world, poems in translation, and I think the editor's really good at picking out those emotional poems about love or grief or birth or death. You'll get all the feelings. Being Human, edited by Neil Astley. Now for this week's workshop. So last week I threw a lot of stuff at you. Sorry if anyone found that a bit intimidating. I did kind of whip through every poetic technique going in 10 minutes. But now for the rest of the course I'm going to slow down and we're going to look in more depth at different aspects of poetry each week. And this week I want us to think more about sound. Now, one thing I mentioned in session 1 is that poetry is traditionally an oral form. That is, it's made to be remembered and recited rather than written and read. And that's still very important to me, to honour that and to think about how poetry sounds. I'm not going to begin though with rhythm, because once you start talking about regular rhythm, which we call metre, you get involved in a lot of technical jargon. And I don't want to look at rhyme today either, because actually rhyme's one of the hardest things to do well. It's quite an advanced skill, I think. But I do want you to start listening to your poems and reading them aloud and thinking about how they sound. So let's think this week about the letters of the alphabet. Poetry is an amazing thing in that it makes you look at language at the level of the line, at the level of the word, and even at the level of the letter, that smallest building block of a poem. And letters are part of the music of your poems, and you need to start thinking about them like that. The repetition of the first letters of words is called alliteration. You might know that term from school. So an example might be seasons of mist and mellow fruitfulness. That's Keats. And it alliterates on the m, mists, mellow. Some types of poetry is structured entirely around alliteration. I've worked on co-translations in recent years of an amazing British Somali poet called Aisha Muhammad Yusuf. And she often works in a Somali form called a gabe, where the whole poem alliterates on one sound like g or k. Her poem, The Sea Migrations, from her book, which I'd recommend, begins: declaiming this poem, agape, I alliterate in D to start debate, to disseminate, to disclose to you, the public. Hey you, be diligent. I'm trying, though it's difficult, to destroy the injustice, demolish the status quo. Sea migration disables my people. I want to drive it back. Great, yeah. And I think, I guess it's a bit like what we might think of in the UK as performance poetry. It's just great to read out loud. And it alliterates on D, of course. D, 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 it's like a thud. Now, which sound you choose to replicate over and over again has an effect. Some sounds like S take longer to say than other sounds like T. So alliteration can slow down or speed up a poem. Certain sounds can act like speed bumps or accelerators. So silk soft takes longer to say than rat-a-tat, although it's the same amount of syllables. Alliteration is also one of those techniques that spills into everyday life. You'll probably most often see it in advertising slogans or newspaper headlines or shop signs. So I thought for a first small exercise, I'd like you to have a go at that. You can choose, depending on what sort of person you are, I guess, to either come up with a shop sign that has your name in it or a tabloid headline that has your name in it. So an example of a shop sign might be something like Clare's Cozy Coffee Cafe, whereas a headline might be Poet Pollard's Public Panic. So you're going to want to read this aloud, so pause the screen and have a go. Okay. Now, let's think some more about the sound qualities of letters, the strain of a n, the hard cough of a k, the liquidity of a l. And these can lead us into another thing I'd like to mention, another term you might know from school, onomatopoeia. Now, it sounds fancy, but these are basically something that even children have a good grasp of. They're words that mimic a sound, like pop or bang or gush. Can you think of any others? Say them aloud at the screen. They're words for saying aloud. Yeah, good. Splash, swish, burp, pop, I heard someone say. And alliteration and onomatopoeia taken to an extreme can be used for something called sound poetry. I'm not sure who invented this. The avant-garde Dada movement in 1915 declared that they invented it, but they were always claiming they invented things. But they called it verse without words, and their poem began, Gadji Berry Bimba, Glandridi Lowly Lonnie Kadori. What does that sound like to you? It sounds kind of mystical to me. It sounds like an incantation. Other people have tried making poetry just out of sounds with no recognisable words in it. Ted Hughes wrote a play called August, which he invented a language for. He thought that anyone, anywhere in the world would be able to understand the play. I'm not sure that was the case, but it was a good idea. Or you might have heard of nonsense poetry written for children. It's a sort of sound poetry. Think of Lewis Carroll's Jabberwocky. 'Twas brillig and the slithy toves, slithy, soft slipping, hissing sounds there that give you an impression of the toves. I'd like you to have a go at writing a line of sound poetry now. It's just a silly exercise really, but think of a strong feeling, anger, giddiness, depression, joy, and then just try and write a line of made up words, no real words, made up words that has that feeling in it. You're just playing with the sound, trying to use this to create the sound of sense, Robert Frost, the poet Robert Frost called it. So you're using letters that sound angry and hard and furious, or you're using sounds that sound gentle and light and soft. See if you can do it. Pause if you want to have a try, because you'll need to read it aloud. Okay. You can try that on a friend later, see if they can guess what the feeling is. Or they might just think you've gone mad. Now, I'm going to set the proper exercise for this week. And I want to get you listening to the world hard and trying to recreate those sounds in a poem. So the exercise is to write a poem about some aspect of your routine this year. What do your days look like? How have they changed since the pandemic? What are the little habits you've built into the week that get you through your Zoom gin and tonic, your daily exercise? This poem could focus on your morning routine or your baby's bedtime routine, or if there's a walk you do often. A lot of us have a regular walk this year. It could be a poem about that. Maybe you're a key worker and you want to write about the anxiety of the commute into work or new routines in your workplace. But what I want you to capture in this poem really is the sounds. So basically I want you to do whatever you always do this week, but this time really, really listen. If you're shielding and it's just you in your home, well, that's really interesting to listen to as well. Nowhere's ever completely silent. What about the hum of the white goods, the sound of the neighbours, the road, the pipes, your breath? Try and use alliteration to capture sounds. Try and use onomatopoeia to capture sounds. Try to avoid cliche. Birds always tweet. Give me a bit more than that. What specific bird can you hear? Can you try and catch its exact tone? Is it a croak or a pewit or a chirr? Have fun with language and sound. Make words up if you like. Lewis Carroll, we mentioned earlier, the nonsense poet and writer of Alice in Wonderland, he made up chortle, which is a mixture of snort and chuckle. I'd love it if some of you invented some juicy new words this week. And please put your poem up at the hashtag Clare's Poetry Circle on Instagram or Twitter. I'm not on Facebook. You can still put it there, but I won't be able to look. Or post your poems in the comments here on YouTube. I'd love to see what you do, and I'd try to read all of them. Brilliant. So happy listening, and I'll hopefully see you next Monday when we're going to be looking at metaphor, and maybe we'll go for a bit more of a spooky Halloween vibe too.